Shein, H&M, Forever 21, Gap, these are all brands that we know and love. Well, what if I told you that they amount to 10% of humanity's carbon emission? Though the prices of these brands might seem enticing, we must ask ourselves what the real cost is. I know personally that I have poured hundreds of dollars into these industries, not knowing that my $5 crop top is putting children in factories and chemicals into my environment. By acquiring a more sustainable wardrobe, you are prohibiting both of these things from happening. I will be expressing in my speech today the negative effects that the fast fashion industry has had upon our youth and our environment and how you can prohibit this from happening. Fast fashion wastes an immense amount of material, which therefore leads to a higher carbon footprint. Every year, 93 million cubic meters of water is used in the fast fashion industry. This meets the consumptional needs of 5 million people and is 20% of the industrial water pollution. In addition, the synthetic materials like polyester require 342 million barrels of oil per year. These barrels of oil pollute the environment and in plainest terms is catastrophic. In addition, these clothes are so cheaply made that they can only be worn a handful of times. The fast fashion industry produces 92 million tons of textile waste annually, and these wastes are left to sit or left to burn in a landfill. In addition, less than 1% of these clothing items is used. The abusement of these materials and resources to create these cheaply made clothing is therefore destructing our environment. Not only is fast fashion destroying our ecosystem, but it is also destroying the future of our underprivileged youth. The mass production of clothing is required to have some sort of child labor and is most commonly seen in most third world countries. Of the 11% of children that are employed, the majority of them are employed by this fashion sector. Child labor is a direct consequence of extreme poverty. Families living below the poverty line have been forced to have their children work in factories day in and day out as young as 5 years old. These children work an upwards of 14 to 16 hours per day in these hazardous conditions and therefore violating their school rights and their freedom rights. In most cases, and in most extreme cases, to have a competitive advantages, factories will relocate to these underdeveloped countries and these third world countries in order to pry on this cheap child labor. The reason that employers are able to do this is because factories and labor unions are so complex that employers are able to sneak these in without consumers or the employers ever knowing. This makes it possible for these big contracts and these big companies to continue this without any repercussions happening. In order to prohibit fast fashion, we must each make the individual choice to stop this. Fast fashion is deprecating, and it comes down to each and every one of us to make the conscious decision to have a more sustainable wardrobe. In order to stop this, the most easiest solution is to avoid fast fashion altogether. Look into brands and research brands of who and who is not using child labor. Though you cannot directly condemn child labor, by making the decision to not pour your money into a brand that influences and employs children, you are making the difference. On a lighter note, if you are looking to, again, save money, I would suggest going into secondhand clothing. Upcycling clothing is a beautiful way of recycling. In most thrift stores and secondhand consignment shops, you can find a piece of article clothing that is as well or better made than most of these fast fashion brands. If you are unable to perform either of the two things, I would suggest looking into brands organizations such as the BICE and the ECLT Foundation that are working day in and day out to prohibit child labor. In conclusion, issues such as child labor and pollution intensify due to fast fashion. Fast fashion is toxic and will continue to prevail unless each and every one of us make the decision to stop this and have a more sustainable wardrobe. We must come from each other and unite with each other to make eco-friendly decisions and support good moral having brands. Fast fashion isn't free. Somewhere, someone is playing. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate it.